Titus Welliver, you play the title character in the Amazon series Bosch, which came back for its second season this spring and has been renewed for a third season. You've done a lot of work in TV, which can be an unpredictable business. So what was it like getting the news that you will actually be coming back for a third season now?
Well, I was thrilled because this is sort of one of those jobs that comes along and you never want it to end. It sort of fulfills both artistic and intellectual and monetary needs in my life. And, the beauty of the character of Bosch is that we have such a large body of work, of source material to draw from Michael's books for the series. And so there is this kind of interesting progression of the character. I'm sort of learning with Harry as Harry learns. So I'm really, really happy to be coming back, and we've chosen two really great books to use this season. So it's the bar just keeps getting a little bit higher, but not in a contrived way.
Can you tell us which books are being chosen, or is that sort of being
we're using the Black Echo. See, we don't follow the books chronologically with the show. So this season we're using the Black Echo, which was the first book, and then we're using another one called A Darkness More Than Night. And there's a lot going on. There's sort of there's two cases ultimately in these books. One of the victims is one of Harry's colleagues when he was in the special forces, and he shows up dead. Anyone who's read the books sort of knows it. That's the one thing. It's not really a spoiler because people know how the stories end, but it's the way in which Michael Connelly and Eric Overmeyer and the writers kind of reconfigure the stories to put them together, which is always very it's kind of like an advent calendar for me because I've already read the books, but always interesting to see how they're gonna put it together. And they've really got their work cut out for them because these are two very, very complex cases this time, and they kind of go all over the place.
Had you read the books before you became involved in the show, or did you read them after you started making the show yourself?
Well, I'd only read one book many, many years prior to doing the show. And so because of time constraints when we were starting production, and I was working on something else at the time, I was really only able to read the books that we were going to use for the pilot, which was Concrete Blonde and City of Bones. Ultimately, we added in Echo Park when we were picked up and had to go for season 1. So I concentrated on those books, and now I really read the books for pleasure, as well as obviously they inform and give me some interesting ideas about some character stuff with Harry as we go along. And I've recorded the last 2 Bosch novels. I've done the audiobooks for those as well, but that's Harry about 10 years from now.
The first season, when it came out last season, was well received, and it came out all at once on Amazon, as Amazon does, so you can binge it all at once if you want. Did it feel different shooting season 2 after having one successful season already under your belt?
Well, I think if anything, we knew our characters well, and as well as that the crew got into a kind of rhythm and an understanding of what it takes to make this show. We work very, very long hours, and there are days where we're literally at 3 different locations. So the work days are long, but in order to sort of facilitate the scope of the storytelling, that's required sometimes. But everybody got into a rhythm. The actors, of course, then had a relationship with each other of kind of trust, and the writers sort of fell into a thing of knowing certain rhythms as well, what kind of stuff worked, what was really, actable, what would help the story, and what was sort of, excess fat, which there is very little. It's very lean muscular meat that we bite into on the show.
You've done a lot of TV on broadcast networks and on cable before this. From just a production standpoint, is it any different, working on a show for a streaming service like Amazon?
No, the process is absolutely identical to any other, working for an HBO or for NBC or an ABC. The process of making the show is the same. The present day binge watching notion is something that is really now in front of us, and that's how a lot of people are sort of ingesting their programming. Our show really lends itself to that well, because rather than our show being sort of within the episodic format, they're more like chapters of a book. And so, when you go to a store and you buy a new book, someone goes and buys the new Bosch book, they're not buying it one chapter a week. They buy the book and they can take it in how they would like. I personally, when I read, I binge read the Bosch books. They're not books that I can read in a leisurely fashion when I'm lying in bed at night, because you're compelled to just keep going because you want to find out what's going to happen. So I think the show, in that regard, and just sort of having my finger on the pulse with friends who watch the show, they pretty much eat the show up in about 2 days, which is a big commitment because you're talking about 10 hours of viewing. But I now sort of do the same thing too. I mean, if I sit down with a box of Game of Thrones, I'll watch until I can't stand it anymore.
Bosch is produced by Eric Overmeyer, who you mentioned, who himself has done a lot of work in TV, and including a lot of crime dramas like The Wire and Law and Order, and So what's it like working with him on this project?
Eric is wonderful. I mean, Eric is not a producer who likes to be sitting on the set. He's very, very focused on the writing, and the tweaking and the rewriting and the nuance, and then in the finished product of the editing of the episodes. And he's a very collaborative guy, and I have tremendous affection for him. And he's also just an inordinately talented writer. So that which comes off on the page is stuff that's that I love to act. But he is very collaborative. So if I have ideas, which are not a lot, he's very, very open to it. So it makes for a really, really, really pleasant work environment.
The show, as we've talked about, is based on the detective novels by Michael Connelly, and he's also a writer and a producer of the series as well. So what's it like having the man who literally wrote the book on your character involved in making the show, alongside all the rest of the team?
Well, it's invaluable, because anytime that an author is present, I guess maybe that's a blessing and a curse in some circumstances. In this, it's really completely a blessing, because Michael created Harry Bosch. And so if I have ideas or if I have questions, I can go directly to the source, and Michael can answer those questions. And if I have ideas, he too is very collaborative. He'll either embrace it or say maybe not, or maybe that would work in another episode. But I mean, to have Michael there, it's invaluable. Because all too often what happens is that the writers are sort of, they're there, they have the title, but they're not really there, and then they're sort of sent on their merry way because the sort of the property has been purchased, and that's not the case. Michael is there, and he's involved every step of the way. And I think that's why the show works the way that it does, because we've not taken Harry and spun him off in some sort of, ridiculous direction that bears no resemblance to the character. The core principles of the character and the storytelling are completely intact.
Season 2 introduced new mysteries and a couple major new characters, particularly played by Jerry Ryan and Brent Sexton. What was it like bringing them on board for season 2?
Well, I've worked with both of them, Brent, on several shows before. We did Deadwood and That's Life, um, and they're two actors who I have great respect for. I worked with Jerry on Star Trek 1,000 centuries ago. It was like 17 years ago. And they both had really, really interesting characters to play, and they beat the page every day they came to work. And so, of course, when you have a pre-existing relationship with an actor, and a trust and a mutual respect, it makes for better work. We just had a really, really good time, and I think that they both did an incredible job on the show. Incredible.
Yeah, and Star Trek Voyager, must have been a very different kind of experience, both, the tone of the show and the characters you're playing and sort of the setting from, getting to work together in a completely different context must have been an interesting experience.
No, it was. I mean, outer space is one thing. I mean, the fun thing about the Star Trek stuff is that which makes it work is that it's grounded in a kind of reality, right? With these completely unrealistic, unbelievable scenarios. They work because nobody ever comments on what's going on, and so you jump in for the ride in the Star Trek world. I would say for Brent, having done Deadwood, this process was a bit more similar in that it has a kind of really rich writing, and just really, really strong characters. And Brent, so many people have commented to me about the fact that they didn't see Brent coming, and same with Jerry. I mean, Jerry really did a beautiful job of bringing that kind of classic noir femme fatale, but she was even a little bit more dangerous than that, which we typically they are tricky characters to play, and she did it really masterfully.
Season 2 also had a major sort of payoff to the mystery of Bosch's mother's murder years earlier. When he was a child. What was it like playing out that storyline? That Bosch obviously has a much more personal, emotional connection to, that compared to other cases he's worked.
Well, I think for him that's something that's obviously the loss of his mother at an early age was a driving force and impetus for him to become a cop, to become a detective, sort of right the wrongs of society in that way, to be the advocate for the victims. In this case, obviously, is very, very personal to him, and there's a moment where his ex-wife Eleanor says, I've seen that book before, and he says, yeah, I've got a new lead, and maybe it's nothing. And if it is nothing, then I'll just put it down until I pick it up the next time. So this is obviously a process that he's been going through over the years. And what's interesting is that he gets to the bottom of it. So he has the knowledge. There is the resolution of the case, but there's no closure for him. That loss, the depth of that loss, which has informed the man that he is very powerful. And so I think it's there, but there's no closure, because, as Harry says, closure is a myth. And I think we find him at the end of the season at a very, very low ebb emotionally. It's kind of empty. It sort of supports that expression of his, which closure is a myth. There he is, he has it, and there's no justice, because the man who committed the murder got to live a fairly complete life and died. And so he can't bring this guy to justice. And I think that's got to be profoundly disturbing and depressing and hard for him. And so I think when we come back in season 3, we will see the impact of that on Harry.
Throughout your career, you've been known for dramatic acting, and you've played a lot of intense, gritty characters, Bosch included. Does any part of you hope that your next show or project, or whatever comes after this, will be a light romantic comedy or something like that?
Yeah, I'm joining the circus when season 12 of Bosch is finished. I've always sort of been of the mind that things come to you at certain times when they do come to you, that there is some sort of mad design to the universe. And I would certainly like to explore doing a romantic comedy or doing something that's really, really a huge departure from that which I've played, which are very intense characters and some pretty bad guys. And, I get a little taste of that with Bosch because he's not a humorless guy. I mean, he has a sense of humor, and there is, in the heaviness of his universe, there is the levity that comes in, which is his daughter. But sure, I mean, if somebody handed me a great comedic script tomorrow where I could make a lot of faces and be zany, I would love to do that. But I think those things come when they come.
So do you know when you start shooting again for season 3 of Bosch?
Yeah, we start at the beginning of August. I mean, they are in the writing room, diligently working, and so they're in that process now. And then I believe we start shooting the first week of August. So it'll be sort of the same timeline as last year. We pretty much shoot from August 1st to December 1st, and then of course they're cutting the show as we're going along. But so sometime in 2017, maybe, I think we were March this year, I believe. Nobody said otherwise. I don't know why they would prolong that, but I hate to stick a pin in the calendar and then be off by months. But it would seem that would be around the same timing. But as I said, this is a very, very big season in front of us. It's each season there is a progression, and I think perhaps the scope of the storytelling in this season is as broad as we've gotten thus far. And I think the first and second season were pretty broad, but this one there's a lot at play this time, even more so, I should say.
Well, I want to congratulate you on seasons 1 and 2 of Bosch, which are both streaming on Amazon, and wish you the best of luck on season 3. And thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much. Totally enjoyed it.